Are you a gamer? Well, you probably are if you clicked on this video, or else you're just deep into a rabbit hole of video essays and you can't bring yourself to stop, even if you don't care about the topics. We've all been there. But if you are a gamer, I'm sure you've asked yourself, why are so many new games that come out nowadays just not hitting anymore? Like, I'm sure you remember when you were a kid and somehow any game you played was amazing, unless it was too difficult or complex for your tiny child mind. But of course, we didn't really know what a bad game was at the time, so we'd eat it up. Because that was the game your parents got you in GameStop that month. Or week if you were lucky. But even if we look back now and remove the nostalgia goggles, I think it's fair to say that a lot more of the games were just better. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm in no way saying that they were all good. There were more than enough bad games back in the day too, but the thing about those bad games is that it was usually something to do with the direction or vision of the game, rather than the game just being bad in itself. Maybe the combat was just ass, or the story was a mess with boring characters, or just lacking any sense of charm to draw us back in. But a problem that I think was pretty rare back in the olden times was games releasing unfinished. The bad games were bad because they were designed badly, but they worked. And that, my fellow gamer, or video essay enthusiast, is where I think the biggest difference lies between old games and new games. Too many games in this current era of gaming are releasing unfinished or without features that developers blatantly said would be in the game. Now, before anybody goes saying, games underdelivered back then too, yes, I am aware of that. Take a look at Sonic 06, or even Fable. Peter Molyneux just constantly talked shit about all sorts of features, riveting stuff like watching trees grow as you played on, and not even that was able to make it into the game. So, yeah, there were line developers and greedy studios back then too, but it was pretty easy to spot the bullshitters from the truthers. The big developers really did not lie to their fan bases back then so that they could keep their reputation and loyal fans. But now it's almost become commonplace in the modern gaming era. But why?
Why?
Well, the simple answer is money. And the long answer is also money. The answer is money. Big studios and just companies in general, they all have their sales meetings every year saying, we must make as much money as we can. They look over everything they put out in the last year or so and they notice the things that failed and they notice the things that succeeded. And lately, a lot of game studios look at their sales and they're pretty happy considering the work that they've been putting in. We have seen games being released in ridiculously bad states, but gamers keep buying the games and not even refunding them or anything. Just going to Twitter to be like, the new Assassin's Creed is dog water, hate Ubisoft, bleh. But then instantly pre order the next one as soon as it's announced? Or else they just keep playing the game so that they can make TikToks being like, look how buggy the game is, don't buy LOL. The studios are getting nothing more than a slap on the wrist from the gaming community.
Sorry.
You know, the community that has been known to have some of the most toxic people on the planet. Like, if you've ever been in a voice chat in Call of Duty or Hello Kitty's Island Adventure, then you know the atrocious shit that some of them can say.
It's like some big brolic black dude named fucking Laquise pulled a fucking bed sheet over my head and just proceeded to skull fuck me!
But then, when the people who literally make the games for them consistently fuck over the gamers, they take no action and think talking shit is going to make the next game better, it just doesn't. What makes a difference is taking action. Just ask yourself, why are microtransactions still so prevalent in games? Even in games where they have no earthly right to be. Like, I'm pretty sure that gamers as a collective decided that they were a bad thing. Like, I've never heard anybody saying that their favorite part of the game was the microtransactions. Being like, my favorite part of the game was the microtransactions. Really had me spending all my money there. Like, who says that? Unless you're like a fucking Richie Rich. But microtransactions are still here? Like, why? And, well, it's because we're putting up with them. Like, I know there are many gamers like myself that don't really engage with microtransactions. But there's a very small population of people that just go mad for them. Like, look, I can't lie and say I've never bought a Fortnite skin before. Spider-Man for life. But then I didn't buy any more. And I would say that like 99% of gamers act like this. But then there's that 1%. That 1% is spending up every single cent that they have. Every single cent to their name. just to make sure that fucking little Johnny won't get to eat again this week, all so that he can get the newest skin, or gun, or fucking umbrella, or horse armor, or fucking Gucci dildo that's been added to the store that week. That 1% is so scared of looking poor or being called a pleb in a fucking Call of Duty lobby that they just eat that shit up. It's like a badge of honor for them. I'm not poor, I have the newest skin. But it doesn't mean anything, that's not a badge of honor. It just shows everybody that you're a fucking slave to fucking corporate consumerism. And that's where a lot of the money comes from for these big studios. They know that there are people out there thinking this way and are going to buy everything they put out, no matter what it is. I mean, why wouldn't you capitalize on it if you're a fucking greedy businessman in a big studio? And well, these businessmen, they know that we do not like microtransactions. They know that the majority of gamers are not going to engage with these microtransactions. But we still buy the game. And that's all they need. They need the sales. If they see that we keep buying games and we'll complain on Twitter being like, oh, I don't like the microtransactions, blah, 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 but we don't do anything about it, they still have our money. Why in the world would they take out something that gets them more money from the stupid 1% that keeps buying all the fucking microtransactions? Well, it's almost like a hidden form of consent. Like, we buy these games even though we know that they have microtransactions that we don't like. But the companies see the sales of their game, along with the hate of the microtransactions. Why would they do anything? Still, once again, if they see that they're still getting their sales, they're making their money, they're taking our money out of our pockets into theirs, and they're making even more by having the things that we hate, i.e. the microtransactions, why in the world would they do anything to stop it or change that? It makes no sense. We continue to inadvertently support microtransactions and other things like unfinished games and everything else just by buying the game and not doing anything about it, just complaining like babies. And studios are going to keep putting out more and more games that have even more egregious microtransactions or just generally unfinished games because nothing's going to change for them. The gamers keep buying. If anything, the studios are just going to try and find a point where there's the least amount of hate with the most microtransactions. Like, all that matters for the studios is that we keep buying and buying and buying their games. And doing nothing else about it. Just sitting there being like, oh, boo-hoo, this game has microtransactions. I hate that. But then keep playing the game without doing anything about it. What I think is the biggest reason for people buying unfinished games or games played with microtransactions or anything else of the like is FOMO. The fear of missing out. The fear of missing out on that Gucci dildo, but also the fear of not being in the conversation. So many gamers feel the need to be a part of the trending game at the time, and whether that's for praising the newest AAA game or shitting all over it, they have a need to be a part of the new thing. Like, one of the biggest examples this year would be to take a look at Redfall. That game is unfinished. Like, it's horrible. But have any of the gamers who bought it refunded it? No. Or at least only a small fraction have. People were still playing the game to post about more bugs and shitty things about it, or else they continued to play it to make video essays and TikToks. And the gamers, they can complain and rant about the game all they want, all the way till the end of time. But Bethesda still has their money. And you know what's something you can do once you've refunded a shitty game? You can still make video essays and content about it. There are channels out there specifically for that purpose, of playing the game with no voiceover or anything, so people can use the footage. And if you want to show a clip of a particular bug, just look it up and ask to use a clip of someone else's, or use some tweet with a video of that bug. The point is to get your thoughts out there, not your own gameplay. And of course, all of the bad backlash is going to make the developers want to take a look at themselves and really want to put out a better game the next time, so that their reputation isn't destroyed. But it won't compel the studios, the people with real power over the games. But instead, the next game is worked on, then probably delayed, with an apology to the fans issued out, saying they want the game to be done, unlike the last one. But the developers will be working hard. They'll be trying their best to put out the best game that they possibly can, even like being forced to put in crunch hours to make sure that the game meets the deadline. But it'll only make a slightly better game in the end. And once again, that's not because the developers aren't working hard. In fact, they really are. But the studio is going to push the game out regardless, no matter what state it's in. Because the studios know that the gamers are really fucking hyped for whatever game they have. And they're going to jump in day one anyways. It doesn't matter if it's full of glitches or anything. The studios know that they're going to get their sales. Then the flood of TikToks and video essays talking about how bad the game is, how glitchy it is, they'll all start flooding in. And then the game gets a load of patches to get it to somewhat half decent and playable state. And then they'll get to work on the next game. Also that the cycle can just repeat itself once again. It's a never-ending cycle of unplayable game to the unfinished game to the maybe half-decent game that gets gamers support again, and then the next game is teased. It has an awesome CGI trailer that makes gamers jizz themselves with gameplay tailored to look good, and then we buy that game and it's horrendous. But gamers continue to keep and play that game so that they can say how shit it is, and that Developer X really needs to pull their cocks up, which still does nothing to affect the industry. My own theory, a game theory, if you will, is that studios are using this as a way of creating a steady source of revenue. Like, they're able to see the sales of the last game, and that's a relatively good judge on how the next one is going to do. And so then the studios, they allow the developers to have a little bit more time on their next game. Because, of course, we the fans, we look at the last game and say, oh, that game was shit, their last one, because they didn't have enough time. So maybe this one's really going to do it. And that slowly gets the gamers on the hype train, like one by one. And then the studios, once they see that there's enough gamers that are willing to buy, that are frothing at the mouth, ready to go to buy this game, they're just going to push it out anyways. Because they've already created the fan base that are going to buy on day one. And so the question becomes, why would studios allow developers to have the time they need to create the fantastic and awesome and cool and fun and finished game that they want to make, when the studios can push out that exact same game and get the exact same amount of sales because they've already created that fan base that are going to buy day one no matter what, and they're not going to do anything. The worst they're going to get, as I said before, is they're just going to complain on Twitter or something. Like, gamers need to learn the skill of wait and see. In regards to microtransactions, I think it's safe to say that one of the most egregious examples would be Middle-earth: Shadow of War, a sequel to the beloved Shadow of Mordor, a fantastic single-player game that explored the Lord of the Rings universe. Shadow of Mordor was great and fun, and has one of the most intriguing and fun mechanics in games, being the Nemesis system. For those that don't know, there were these goblin leaders, and your goal is to kill them all or to get them to be on your side, but they were tough. And if you at any point died to them, they would become stronger and gain advantages over you until you defeated your quote-unquote nemesis. It was awesome. But then a sequel was revealed. New and improved, bigger scale, more awesome in every way. And then it was released. And people were shocked to find an ungodly amount of microtransactions and loot boxes that completely undermined the fantastic Nemesis system. In a game that was completely single player, no online aspect at all. There was uproar, and rightly so. Microtransactions had no place in that game and were only there purely out of corporate greed. And because of this uproar, the game was updated and had the microtransactions removed. It's almost like taking action actually does something. Like, look, I know we all buy some game, we play, we finish it, even if it's in a bad state, because we like the game, or we like the game that came before it, or we like the story that it's a part of, or simply put it, we're having fun playing the game. And I do realize that it's almost unreasonable to expect people to not play their favorite game's sequel, or their favorite developer's new game, or whatever the fuck on day one, because we love those games. We want to talk about them. But the thing to remember is that the game will still be there after its release. It's not like you can only buy the game on its release date. There are so many ways that you can avoid spoilers or videos of anything, not just games. We can all easily ban those words from our Twitter or our TikTok feeds for a while, or we can finally start managing our social media addiction, but maybe that's a problem for another day. But doing this essentially means that you're waiting for the game's actual release date, rather than the studio's release date. the date that the game was actually finished and playable. And isn't waiting a little while longer to play the game until it's actually done better than playing the game on release date, only to see it filled with an onslaught of glitches and bugs and microtransactions that are going to be patched out? Like, if you play the game and see that, your view is going to be forever tarnished, in my opinion. Like, it would be so much better if you just wait that tiny bit longer, because then you'll get the experience that the developer actually intended for you to have, rather than the cash grab that the studios are using it as. I think a particularly good example of this would be with Cyberpunk 2077. And yes, I know that game has been talked about to death, but it's the best example for what I want to talk about. And there's a reason that everybody else talks about it too. To say that I was hyped for this game, along with many, many others, would be an understatement. I was heartbroken at every delay. I just wanted it so badly. I needed it. But I knew if the game was getting delayed, it was because it wasn't ready. And so I made my peace with each delay. And then December 10th of 2020 rolled up, and it was finally released. I hopped onto my PS4 and booted it up instantly, giddy with excitement. I was creating my character, admiring the details, changing my penis length, and then I finally jumped in, only to be met with the game crashing. I thought to myself, well, this game is really big, so I guess it might crash sometimes on my dusty ass PS4. But then I played more, and the game was just unplayable. I pushed through for a while, but I was constantly having to reload missions or saves because of some stupid bug or because Jackie was intent on walking through a wall instead of the door. But I assured myself that this wasn't going to happen all the time. Maybe these missions were just bugged. Maybe it was just the early game. But then I finished the first string of missions revolving around the tower heist. And upon finishing it, I walked 10 feet and the game crashed. And my save was corrupted. I was heartbroken and immensely pissed off. I, along with many others, refunded the game that day. There were mass refunds. CD Projekt Red issued apologies and statement after statement about how the game will be fixed and to just hold tight. But it wasn't enough for me. I never touched it again, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. Even though everybody says the game was amazing now with the Phantom Liberty update, people say it's finally the game it was supposed to be. But no gamer should ever have to say that about a game. We should be getting full, complete games. I think the only reason Cyberpunk was allowed this second chance was because of the love that many people have for the Witcher series, particularly The Witcher 3. And if this studio wasn't CD Projekt Red, I don't think Cyberpunk would even be considered by gamers anymore. I think people tend to underestimate the power that first impressions hold. Like, even with this new update, the hype I had for the game and the connection I had with it was destroyed. I can't bring myself to play it unless I get it for free or something. But even then, my desire to explore Night City faded the day I got there. Inevitably, the game was pushed out because they knew the sales were there. And not specifically CD Projekt Red, more so the studios and shareholders who needed more money and forced their hand. And it's obvious, because of the work CD Projekt Red did put into the game after release. They didn't have to put in all of that extra work. They could have left it and moved on. But I feel they fixed it because they wanted to. CD Projekt Red had 4 years to make The Witcher 3, a sequel that would reuse and build upon assets in the previous games. CD Projekt Red then had 4 years to make an entirely new IP that they wanted to be deeper and bigger than The Witcher 3, which was already a massive undertaking in itself, but it just wasn't enough time. But they had to meet the deadlines that were made by people in suits who have never touched a game, let alone made one. It's not fair on us, and it's not fair on the developers. Cyberpunk is complete now in 2023, and I may be in the minority here, but if I could have had them delay the game until now, I would in a heartbeat. I would much rather wait impatiently, frothing at the mouth, going mad waiting for this game, rather than play it early in an unfinished state. Because I think if we truly love these games, then we would boycott them, we would refund our copies, until they were at a standard that is worthy of being our favorite game. Another game that is similar to Cyberpunk would be the also talked about to death game, No Man's Sky. I also played No Man's Sky on release day back in 2016, but the game had next to nothing in it. It was clearly unfinished. It was empty planets with a handful of the same reused NPCs and a quote unquote story of getting to the center of the universe. And when you look at that game today, it is incredibly clear that the game wasn't finished. Now you can build bases, have gigantic spaceships and space battles, and crucially, it actually added multiplayer, rather than insisting that it was already there and that the game was too big to find anyone.
But actually going to a planet and another planet player being in the same space at the same time is incredibly rare. And it's something that, depending on how many people play the game, might not even happen, basically.
Hello Games worked tirelessly, just like CD Projekt Red, to make sure that they could make No Man's Sky the game they wanted it to be, rather than the cash grab that the studio saw it as. But I still also can't return to No Man's Sky after how betrayed I feel after spending the full price for a glorified walking simulator. But even though Hello Games worked incredibly hard post-launch, we can't let Sean Murray fully off the hook and walk away scot-free. That man lied like his life depended on it. In fact, it probably did. And of course, this may just be a me problem. I'm sure there are many other people who played these games on release day, they got super pissed, and then they returned to a great game that was there waiting for them. But personally, I can't do that. Like, as silly as it may sound, I feel like almost insulted by these games. That this is the standard that the developers felt was worthy for their adoring fans. But at the end of the day, the question here is simply, what can we learn about these games and any other game that's gone through a similar path to it? Well, I think the main thing is realizing that most of these games, and most games that are unfinished or pushed out early, are created by passionate developers that truly want to create a wonderful experience for their fans, but they're forced into putting the game out early by the studios who have all of the power, sadly. Cyberpunk and No Man's Sky, not so much Shadow of War and Redfall, received so much love and attention after release from the developers who really wanted to right their wrongs and provide the experience that they were actually hoping to give to their fans. And what I do think is one of the main components of that is the fact that A, the developers were passionate about these games, but B, people refunded their copies and they were in uproar on social media. The studios lost millions upon millions, and they were almost forced to allow the developers to actually take time and work on the games in order to save their reputation. But more importantly, in order to save their future profits on the next game. And I think that this clearly shows that gamers have the power to actually affect the gaming industry. They just can't recognize that power, even though it's something we experience every day on games, and that's the power of community. I would like to make one thing abundantly clear, and that's that this video is not intended to shit on developers. I truly believe that almost every single developer out there wants to put out an amazing game and provide a great experience. And so I can only imagine how shitty it must feel when you see your hard work being put out there, getting shit on, all because some studio forced you to put it out early. Like, imagine working super fucking hard, working extra hours, not seeing your family, not going to the bathroom, just to make sure that what you're working on is as good as it can possibly be. And then some guy in a suit comes in who hasn't helped in any way to make the game, says, oh yeah, this is shipping next week, make sure you get that done. And so you do, because it's your job. But it's nowhere near as good as you could have made it. But people playing the game are shitting on it and saying, you're fucking lazy. Like, I would lose my mind. I would lose every ounce of passion that I have for game developing if I was hearing this shit, even though I didn't get time to work on it. So I can only imagine how they must feel. Now, of course, there are also studios and developers who are purely in it for the money, just to make a quick buck off of everyone, but they are few and far between, and even more so in today's day and age with the internet and everything. They are so much easier to sniff out. And, well, with all that being said, the question remains. One thing I should mention is that gamers do need to lower their expectations by, like, just a smidge. And, like, not in the way that people were talking about Baldur's Gate 3 and how it was an anomaly, which it is, by the way, but more so in the way that gamers are expecting way too much. Like, even Baldur's Gate 3 has some areas that I think were lacking. Like, for example, I wish that when you started a combat encounter, the only way to finish it was not just by killing everybody, but rather you could just randomly start talking to them. Talk throughout the battle even, or something. Obviously, that's hard to do. I'm not a game developer. I don't know how that shit works. But it's something that I would do. But do I complain about it? I mean, other than just kind of like right there. But no, I don't. I just make do because it's not a bad game. I just have to play the game with the mechanics that Larian Studios actually wanted me to use when I'm playing the game. Like, we see a lot of hate on really good games for not having a ludicrous amount of free will, or not anticipating what every specific gamer will want to do, or the silly thing of complaining about not having photorealistic details in every inch of a game. Like, seriously, grow up. Like the controversy just before Spider-Man 2 dropped about buildings not being truly filled. Rather, it was some, like, gaming effect. I don't really understand it. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ludicrous. If you want photorealistic storytelling, go watch a fucking movie. Games are not supposed to look exactly like real life. In fact, I think striving towards photorealism takes a lot of the charm out of the game. Like, I'm a big advocate for style over graphics every day. But with all that being said, the main thing that needs to be sorted out is that gamers need to get over their sense of FOMO. You don't need to play every new game, let alone on release day. And you don't need to be scared of missing out on the community in the game if you don't play on release day or something. If the game is good, the community will be there waiting for you with open arms. Unless it's like Overwatch or something. Not every game is made for you. And more importantly, you're not missing out by not buying on day one. Rather, you're just getting there later. Like, what I think would be the best course of action is to not buy the new game until maybe about 3 days or so after the release date. But within those 3 days, read reviews, watch Let's Plays, look at the first few hours, or however much you would like to see, and decide if that is worth your money or not. We're lucky that we have these content creators that have the money to actually spend on these games on day one and play them and show them to us so that we can judge and base our opinion off of that. And if we see that the game isn't in an acceptable state, like maybe it's running badly, or has missing features that were previously confirmed, or plagued with bugs and glitches, or just plainly not what the studio said it would be, then gamers as a collective should boycott it. Or if you happen to indulge on the pre-orders to get it for day one, refund your copy as soon as you realize it's not up to your standards. Having your money back is the best way of sticking the middle finger to those billion-dollar studios. And, well, that sounds good to me. Like, is eat the rich just something we say now and don't really mean anymore? Once the profits crumble, the studios will realize that we are not putting up with underfinished and underpromised games anymore. Like, if we also microtransactions in games where they have no earthly right to be, or just a generally completely unfinished game, then we refund them. We refund our copies. We boycott them. And then on Twitter or whatever the fuck, we say why we won't buy or why we refunded. And it really will not take the studios long to realize what is happening, and they're going to take action. Because at the end of the day, the biggest motivator for these studios, it's not creating the best game ever, it's not creating the most fun game ever, it's not catering to every single demand that we gamers have. It's turning the biggest profit possible. These studios are driven by money and greed. And if people aren't buying, their profits aren't rising. And they will do everything in their power to rectify that. Well, my friends, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to leave a like or subscribe or whatever. Did you agree, disagree? Like, leave a comment. Let me know. I'd love to hear it from you. And with all that being said, take care.